So here we are, we've added a very basic landscape, but let's set this up so that we can get some significantly nicer effects out of this, and we can get rid of this tiling effect going on. So I'm going to go back to my ML Dirt, and this time, instead of having this set up in such a way that we just get this texture coming in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an input. So right click and type in input, and you see that we have function input. Now what I essentially want to do is I want to have it so that, I'm going to hit apply so you can see this. By adding an input, you can see that the input is now a node in the material function itself. So you can name these and set these to any type that you want. In this case, we're going to be plugging in the landscape's UV data into this texture and this texture. So I'm going to set this to be input type vector2, and it's going to be called close UVs. So plug that in and plug that in. Now it's going to look broken right now because at the moment it doesn't know what value it should be. But what we can do is right click, landscape layer coords, and plug that in. And now if I hit apply and I go back, oh, of course. So this value that's been plugged in is currently set up such that it's previewing off of this information, but it's not equal to this information in the final build. And that's because if I go to here, there's a little thing that says use preview value as default. So I'm going to check that because I actually want to do that. Now essentially what I want to have set up here is apply, save it. You can now see that this is gray where before it was white. And the reason for that is if I go back to here, the UV data is being read straight in. But what does that mean? Well, it means in my material, if I was to go to here and set up landscape coords, and let's just plug in a number such as 12. You can now see that it's scaled up the entire landscape. And here's the problem. All the tiling's gone, but if I was at ground level, this would look quite large. But if I pull back to here, you can see that again we have some tiling. So what we actually need to do is something a little bit creative here. We need to essentially set it up so that when we're close to the ground, the area around us is a very tight, compact material layer. But when we pull away and we're further away from an object, the material is going to be a much larger pattern, but we're not going to notice that it's missing detail because we're so far away from it. So how we do that is we go back to our ml_dirt and we look at what we have here. Now, this is our basic material, but what if we change this around a little bit? What if we set this up such that this was the close one, but we had another material that was being blended in to be the far one? So the quickest way for us to do this is going to be select everything that we've got to here, and I'm just going to Control W to duplicate it. Before I go any further, I'm going to go to my input and I'm going to set this to be distant UVs. And I'm going to set up these values as well. Now in this situation, I'm going to set these up to be, my gut feeling says that this could be set up as a scale of 19. And before I set this up to be a scale of 12, I might go a little bit lower with 10. Now it's going to be a little hard to see here, but hopefully you'll be able to see it on the landscape itself. Now, what I've essentially done here is I've created two of the same pipelines, but when I get to here where it says set material attributes, I'm now going to actually get this and we're going to blend them. So I can go to this value called blend material attributes. And what this does is it gets this one and it gets this one, and it's like a lerp, except it takes the entire materials to blend them together. All I need to do from this point is find a way to blend the two things together. So before I go any further, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a texture sample to just kind of demonstrate what's going on here. I'm just going to get a shape, doesn't matter what it is, this'll do, and I'm going to plug that into the alpha. And the reason I'm doing that is if I hit apply and look at this in the world, if I get close to the ground, it might be a little hard for you to see, but you can see that it's blending between the two of them here. So see how there's those weird lines sticking out? That's because it's blending between them there. So what we need to do is find a way to create a mask around us that is relative to how far we are from the object. And there's a really good way to do this. And to do it, what we need to do is get the world position of the current piece of dirt that we're looking at. Now, once we know where that dirt is, let's find out how far away that dirt is from my camera. And I can do that by typing in the word distance. So absolute world position returns the location in world space of the pixel that we're looking at. And if I get the distance between that and my camera position, oops, accidentally clicked on the wrong one. You can see that we have camera position in world space. If I get that and plug it in, this is actually going to give me a distance value of how far away it is, which means if it's 1,000 Unreal units away, this is going to be a value of 1,000. Now, that's a big number, because it means that the only stuff that would ever be in the black part of the mask would be literally touching my face. But if we get this distance and we divide it by a number, so I'm just going to divide this by 1,000. If I divide this by 1,000 and then clamp it, it means that it's never going to be a value over 1. So I've got that, and I'm just going to plug this in for the time being to demonstrate what's going on. In fact, what might be a good idea for me to show it off is to quickly add just I'm going to substitute the current colors that we have in there with some bright colors so you can just see the difference. So don't follow this step yourself, just look at what I'm doing. So I'm going to plug this in and plug this in, and when I'm up close it's orange, and as I move further away it's green. Does that make sense? So when I'm up close it's orange, and when I hit 1,000 units it's now green, so it blends between those two. Now the problem we have is that we really don't want it to start blending for a certain distance, and then after that distance we want it to start blending. So how do we do that? Well, let's think. If this is the distance, if something is 10 meters away from me, if I get the distance value and I subtract a value, so I subtract, say, 1,000, it means that between 0 and 1,000, when it's clamped, the value is still going to equal 0, because when it equals negative 100, for instance, it becomes a value of 0. And then if I do the divide after that, it's going to then do the fall off from that point on. So all I actually need to do here is subtract the distance from my camera. So I'm going to subtract, just as a ballpark, I'm going to subtract 2,000. And if you look at this, it's orange, it's orange, it's orange. But then when I get to this distance, it now fades to green. Now, I'm going to go and delete these nodes that I added and plug in the dirt that I created into my base color. Apply and save. And if I look at this in the world, I'm now going to set this to be a much smaller tile than what we have set up at the moment. So just to demonstrate it a bit better, close UVs are going to be set to a very low number, such as 2 or maybe even 3. We'll try 2. Apply. So give it just a second. Now, notice when it's up close, it's this small stuff, and then as I pull back, it's the big stuff. And if I zoom in slowly, you'll see it blend between the two. So it's up to us to kind of work out how far we wanted to spend blending between the two. Now at the moment it's very visible because you're looking for it, but if you imagine all of the hills and everything else in the way, it becomes a lot harder to spot over time. So how I'm going to do this from here is I'm going to go to my dirt layer, and I'm just going to set these values up to be a little bit better. I'm going to set this from being an input of 2 to say an input of 5. Apply. And the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to set my distance blend to be something that's a bit better than what we've got at the moment. So at the moment it's waiting 2,000 units before it even starts blending. I'm going to drop that back to be a bit closer, say 1,500. And I'm going to set the divide amount so that it's less abrupt. So we've gone from 1,000, I'm going to turn that up to 2,000. That looks a little bit nicer as I pull away and then I get close. This now looks quite detailed near my feet, but at a distance it also has no noticeable tiling. So that's fantastic. Now, the final thing that I'm going to do in preparation for the next section is going to be setting this up so that this is only really being calculated once. So all I need to do there is create a function input, and this is going to be called distance blend. And all this means is we want to take in a scalar and output that straight to the alpha of the mask, and also check the preview as default. All this means is that while this is in my function right now, if I wanted to, I should hit apply so you can see it. In my landscape material, it's now an input, which means if I wanted to in my main landscape, I could get this and plug it into all of the different layers that I'm going to create so that they all blend together, and I only ever need to change the values at this point. So we've made it something that we can use to preview within the dirt, but we can't override elsewhere. Actually, I'm going to keep this in here for the time being. So, with that said, the only other thing that I think is a really good idea right now is for us to create another output. Now at the moment this is outputting result, so let's rename this to be material blended. And I'm going to click on the output and hit Control W, and this one here is going to be called height. Okay? And the reason it's called height is we actually want to calculate what a height mask would look like between these two materials. And the nicest way for me to really do that is to get material attribute, which opens this up and gets a specific value that I want. In this case, the value that I want is going to be just the base color. And once again, I'm now going to do what I did before. I'm going to get a component mask, and I know the green layer works reasonably well for this, so I'm going to follow the same process that I did to create a roughness map. But this time around, what I'm going to create is a height map that kind of helps us out there. In fact, these values are basically what I want up until the very end. So I'm going to get this, and I'm going to then change the power nodes afterwards. So plug that into base color. Oops, sorry. Plug that into there. Yep, there we go. So for anyone that missed it, I'm multiplying, I'm clamping, and I'm powering all over again. This time I'm not going to use the lerp that I had at the end there. So this is my current height map. I'm actually going to increase the power a little bit here so that the dirt is... actually, you know what? No, I'm going to drop this down to about 1.1 looks like it'll probably be good. This way dirt kind of starts filling in those cracks reasonably early before the stones really do. It's up to us how we want this to work, and it's going to take some tinkering after the fact. But for the time being, I think this number is probably going to be okay. Somewhere around 1.1 or 1.25 is probably going to be good. So I'm going to plug that in, and this is going to be height. And this isn't going to be used just yet, but I promise you we'll use it in just a bit. So now that we've seen how to do distance blending on materials, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at how to blend those materials into an advanced landscape.